the real opportunity that we have in the future. This continent is going to be home to a quarter of the world's population by 2050. This is the continent that has renewable energy resources. This is the continent that has 2/3 of the world's arable uncultivated land. This is the youngest continent. So we have real assets that has the potential to make Africa central to what happens globally going into the future. And that is why integration is front and center. Left data speaks a different language. Data shows that investments in our region are not as risky as they are being profiled. So in fact, this profiling of our region as a risky destination is a conspiracy by people. And I saw some of them about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. They were trying to profile us, the credit rating agencies. I think they are the new tools of colonialism, if I may say. Because data speak a different language from the risk we are being profiled. And as a result, we are all now in this space, and it's almost a consensus that the people, the rest of us in this region, we pay anywhere between 4 and 8 times more for resources, for development, for investment, put in place infrastructure than others, than our brothers and sisters in the global north. And we have no problem with our brothers and sisters in the global north accessing finances. Is that why are we not getting the same treatment? Why are we being profiled negatively when facts and data show something different? So this is the conversation we want to have, and it is a foregone conclusion today that the system we have is not working. It is not working. It can do better. And that's why we are saying there is need for reform of the international financial system. To do 3 things. Reform, to speak to time. How long does it take? It takes minimum 18, 24 months. You know, some of the interventions don't have that kind of gestation period. It doesn't have that. There needs to be a conversation. We need a conversation that makes all of us winners. And what we are saying is, in the reform of these institutions, we're not being reckless. What we are saying is, let us have a fairer international financial system that doesn't price the rest of us into debt, into default, into a situation where it becomes impossible. I mean, let me just ask us seated here. If one person is paying 8 times more than the other, isn't that person paying 8 times set up to fail from the beginning? In fact, it would be a miracle if you don't default. In fact, I think some people are asking themselves, why have these people not defaulted? Yeah, the credit rating agencies were really pushing that, you know, Kenya is in very serious situation. Until we told them, if you continue profiling us negatively, we will pay off this debt and see what you're going to do. Because they were making it look like we are unable to pay. We're telling them we want to pay. In fact, we want to pay before it's due. And they wanted to tell us, if you pay before it's due, it amounts to a default. What kind of nonsense is that? I mean, if you pay your debt early, how does it become a default? It's madness, isn't it? But you know, we're not conforming to what their expectations. So they are wondering, you are paying 8% more. Why are you not defaulting? Why do you want to pay early? You know, this is the unfortunate conversation we want to have. And that's why, just to conclude, we're saying we want a fairer system that doesn't mistreat other people. We want a fairer system that we pay whatever others are paying, and good people asking for a fairer system saying that we want to pay the same interest others are paying is not asking for too much. It is not breaking the system. It is not unreasonable. I mean, by all accounts, it cannot be unreasonable. We're all saying, let's pay what others are paying. And let's get the scale that can help us achieve what we want. And let us accelerate so that we can all move at the same pace. So that is the push. It is the position of many leaders in the global South. This is not a conversation of North versus South. No, it is a conversation of fairness. And we are not saying the global North should pay more than us. No, we are saying let's pay the same. Tell me how that is not a good thing. Institution. There are limitations with the World Bank. There are limitations with the IMF. There are limitations with multilateral banks. And we are not accusing them of anything. There are limitations, genuine. Maybe they are 20%, as has been said, of what they were. Maybe the magnitude of the financial challenge that we have as a globe goes beyond these institutions. How do we develop other capacities? How do we raise more resources? And that is why the conversation about carbon tax is no longer a sterile. It's no longer a sterile proposition. It is a real proposition. How do we raise resources that can be used in a different paradigm without the current limitations, where we invest these resources in the biggest return on matters to do with green growth? How do we decarbonize the globe together? If the best opportunities are in Africa, let us invest in Africa. If the best opportunities are elsewhere to decarbonize our development, let us invest in that elsewhere. We are ready to have that conversation. And I said that we do not want to be left out of the equation. We weren't countries in 1945. We didn't exist in 1945. Today we exist. And we don't want to be pushed into the corner. We want to be seated here and making a contribution. If it is carbon tax, if it is on aviation, we want to pay our portion. If it is on marine movement, we want to pay our portion. We want to pay our portion. We don't want to be joyriders. We don't want to be bystanders. We don't want to be in some corner. Because the old adage says, if you are not on the table, you could possibly be in the menu. I think we may possibly have been in the menu for long. Now, we don't want to be there anymore. We want to be where the conversation is having on the next global financial system. And we want to make our contribution, if there is any contribution to be made in terms of paying our portion. There has been a debate as to whether you can talk about a green growth, development, climate change in the same sentence. I mean, there's been a belief somehow that green energy is not sufficient, doesn't have the scale, doesn't have the cost that can drive industrialization or real development. I think the narrative is changing. In fact, the reality is that it is no longer possible to talk about development without talking about climate change. Because climate change is having a huge impact on any meaningful development. In fact, many countries, as was said very ably by Secretary General here, many countries are funding with their huge budgets the effects of climate change. And you have two situations. She said it so well. Two situations. Situation number one, you have a situation where because of this profile of risk, you're paying much more than others. You have another situation of effects of climate change, which you never benefited from. You know, you didn't get the industrialization that came with the exploitation of fossil fuels. So you're stuck with a situation where you are paying huge interest rates in an underdeveloped system, and you turn in between, you don't know where to stand. So what we should be, my focus, and that is why we are having the Africa Climate Summit, where we want to consolidate our thoughts, our ideas, and what we think the solution to where we are, the challenge that we are of development versus climate change, what we think as a continent should be the way forward on the 4th and 6th of next month. And I welcome all of you to come to the summit so that you can bring these very good ideas and we can consolidate them together. Because of the inevitable, and it's now a confirmed reality that Africa is home to the largest reserves of green energy. Africa is also home to the minerals, actually almost 40–45% of all the minerals required for green transition. And therefore, with that kind of situation, green growth will be most viable in this continent. And development around industrialization, around manufacturing, will now make a lot of sense where you have the largest reservoirs of green energy, and that is in this continent. And therefore, going into the future, green growth, green industrialization, green manufacturing, the genuine natural home will be in Africa. And that is why we are pitching that if the reality is, and I think we all now agree that it is not an option anymore unless we do not want to have a home for all of us. If we continue the fossil fuel trajectory, we will burn this home, this earth, and it will burn for everybody. It will not burn for the global south and leave the global north, or burn for the global north and leave the global south. We are on these together, so we better act together. And that is why we have taken the position that we do not want the old narrative of finger pointing. We want to solve this problem together. The global south and the global north together. How are we going to do it together? We have renewable assets. We have green energy. We have green minerals. We can provide green industrialization. What we don't have in abundance is financing and technology. We can have a win-win outcome if we bring global south green energy resources, global south green energy, global south green minerals, and we bring global north technology and global north financing. We will come out with a win-win solution instead of the endless quarrel between the north and the south. That is the proposal we intend to bring, and we do not want to come to the table with a blame game situation. We want to come to the table with solutions, and we will be proposing how we intend, how Africa can leverage on its assets, number one, of green energy, number two, of green minerals, number three, of our human capital, the youngest continent in the world, number three, of smart agriculture, and unlocking the potential of the 2/3 uncultivated and arable land in our continent. How do we bring these assets to the table to do two things: to provide green growth, to provide jobs, and to decarbonize the rest of the globe? We can make a very significant contribution as a continent using the assets that we have in solving the global problem of climate change that is coming as a result of the exploitation of fossil fuels. So I think we really have a win-win possibility. And we can do this together. So this is what I imagine that to be, and we will be having that conversation. We are willing to listen to others. We are willing to bring our ideas on the table. What we have refused is that we shall not be a continent anymore of victims. We will not come to any table just as victims of climate change. We are coming to the table with ideas and possibilities of solutions on what we can contribute, because Africa can make a contribution to the global solution, the global challenge, and provide solutions to the global problem that we have. And we want to be seen in that new approach to the issues around the global challenges we have. And I did say, for example, I mean, we need to look at alternative sources of funding. We appreciate that there are limitations, as was said by my sister, that we cannot depend on the benevolence of a few countries. This is a global challenge. It requires a global solution. Depend on the US or Canada or France or Germany. We have to have global infrastructure that will give us global resources. Then we need to agree this time round, the way it is given out is not given out where others are paying 6 times more than others. It is now given out. We agree on the formula for giving out. We were not there when the other formula was being agreed. So this time round, we agree on this formula together. And let me say one more thing. You see, even speaking to this aspect of risk and aspect of, debt as a percentage of GDP, what is the balance sheet we are using for countries? Have we really captured the assets of every country? On one hand, we capture the assets that have been developed using fossil fuel resources. On the other hand, we give no account of renewable energy resources that we accept that they are huge resources, but they are nowhere in any country's balance sheet. We have huge assets of carbon sequestration. When are we going to make our renewable assets part of our assessment of our wealth and make it a percentage, the money we have borrowed, a percentage of GDP? When are we going to make our renewable assets part of our balance sheet? When are we going to make our carbon sequestration assets, natural assets, our mangroves, our forests, when are we going to make it part of our assets, so that when you calculate the money we have borrowed as a percentage of GDP, you don't tell us we are at 65 when we are actually at 15. It means we can open up a lot of fiscal space if we were assessed appropriately with all our assets. I mean, it's another conversation we must have. I have talked to the Africa Development Bank on this subject, and they are the ones actually who are telling me, look, I think there is a conversation we should have. And we should do this without all these geopolitical pushes here and there. We do not think, and I insist that we shouldn't be having this quarrel between the West, the South, China on the other end. I mean, we're all part of the same equation. And it's not also going to be fair for anybody to be asked to choose friends. That you cannot talk to the West and talk to China at the same time. I mean, that would be very unfair if anybody were to require of us that, or to try and choose friends for anybody. I think we just need to be fair. Let us look at a global problem. Let us have a global solution, including everybody. China must be in the equation. Our brothers and sisters from the global south, those of us from the continent, must be in the equation. Of course, our brothers from the global north must be in the equation. Let us have a conversation about how to solve this problem together. Because in any case, when it finally, I don't want to use the not so good words, when we are in this together, and everybody is going to, I didn't want to say when the shit hits the pan, because I'm told it's unpresidential. So So we will all be in it together. So it's better we leverage on all our assets. What China can bring into the equation, let's get China to bring into the equation. What the West can bring into the equation, let us bring it into the equation. What we as a continent can bring into the table, our assets, our renewable assets, our green minerals, whatever it is that we can mobilize, our agricultural farms and all our human capital, whatever we can bring to the table, let us bring to the table and solve this global problem together. About finance and how to de-risk it, how to make it affordable, how to make it accessible. That conversation is not complete until you bring in the private sector. Because the private sector has great potential of a multiplier effect. But you know, the private sector cannot go ahead, sometimes, especially in spaces that are risky. The private sector is driven by return. And therefore, they want to know what is the return, because the private sector shareholders demand from management, you know, results. So for us to multiply what we are doing in the public sector, the private sector is very significant and very important. And that is why when we are discussing about de-risking, there is no way you can get private sector money into Africa if we haven't sorted out the issue of risk. Nobody's going to invest here. We just have to be honest to ourselves. The moment we sort out that, and they can see what the public sector is doing, the private sector can multiply that 2-3 times. It is they can bring that on board. Now, I will give you a practical example. In Kenya, we had a conversation as a country about the cost of fintech money, and it was quite something. It was quite a conversation. In fact, it was one of the big conversations in the last election. Fuliza, you remember, you guys remember. And it was because I think the fintech companies were charging 1%, I think, per day or thereabout. So it was 300% per year or something like that. So, and the big conversation was, this is predatory. That was the language then. But let me tell you the positive side of this. So when we decided, as government, when I came into office, I promised that we would look at another financial product that would be cost effective. So we came into office, I called the fintechs together. They are business people, but they are also patriotic. I was really amazed at the patriotism of the fintech companies. They were making money with what they were doing, but they were willing to work with us on a product that would make them make less money, but more beneficial to the public. That was amazing. I mean, really, that's how positive they were. So we developed a product, the Hustler Fund. Instead of charging 1% per day, we are charging 0.002%, is 8% per year. And all the fintechs that were in that space, many of the banks that were in that space participated in bringing into being a product that was more amenable, accessible. It was much more cheaper to the public. They participated in it because they saw the value of greater access. Today, we have close to 15 million Kenyans on the Hustler Fund. We've lent 35 billion in the last 8 months, Kenyan shillings. And we have 7 million people almost daily in that space. So, and the same private sector that was participating in the predatory one, if I may call it, are participating in this one, and they are supporting it. So that tells you how the public sector can influence the private sector to do the right thing, to bring down the costs from what it was to what it is. And that is how I could explain that if, as the public sector, we were to de-risk the space around financing, we would leverage more resources from the private sector once they see what we are doing in the public sector. So my conviction is that the private sector is an important player in this equation we are having around financing and the climate change, and especially financing for those of us in the global south that we feel a bit disadvantaged.